A self-driving car is speeding toward 5 people. Construction workers, alive, breathing, seconds from home, the brakes fail. There is no time for human reaction. The vehicle must choose, continue forward, killing 5, or swerve onto the sidewalk, killing 1 bystander. MIT asked the world, what should the machine do? Over 40 million people across 233 countries answered that question. Their choices were recorded, analyzed, and transformed into what became known as the moral machine experiment, a digital oracle of ethics built to crowdsource the rules of right and wrong for artificial intelligence. It was hailed as progress, a way to finally program morality, cleanly, consistently, at scale. But what if that wasn't the real purpose? What if this machine wasn't designed to make moral decisions, but to reflect the moral instincts we're too afraid to confront? What if the machine isn't malfunctioning, but performing exactly as it was told? In this video, we're not asking whether machines can be ethical. We're asking what happens when they become our moral proxies and what that reveals about the species pulling the levers behind the code. You're about to enter a world where AI doesn't just calculate efficiency, it calculates who lives and who dies, where philosophy meets programming, and where our darkest ethical contradictions are no longer private, they're embedded in machine. Here's what you'll discover: how the famous trolley problem, once a thought experiment for moral reflection, has been repurposed into a decision engine for autonomous vehicles. Why our attempts to encode morality into AI are failing not due to technical error but philosophical confusion. And why moral outsourcing to a machine isn't the end of ethics, it's the end of responsibility. Because this isn't a story about AI, it's a story about us. About how we crave simple answers to impossible questions, about how we'd rather a machine make the hard calls so we don't have to. By the end of this video, you'll understand. The danger isn't that machines are learning to think, it's that we are forgetting how to. It began with what felt like progress. Engineers and ethicists working side by side, asking one noble question: how do we teach machines to make the right decisions? And on the surface, there seemed to be a clear path. In artificial intelligence, we use benchmark data sets to train systems all the time. It's how AI learns to recognize faces, detect diseases, even play chess or generate text. You give the model a task, you give it thousands, sometimes millions of examples. Then you test its ability to match the correct answer. If a photo contains a cat, and the AI says cat, the system is working. The benchmark is objective, the result is measurable. There is a ground truth, binary, black and white. So why not do the same for ethics? That was the idea behind the moral machine experiment launched by researchers at MIT. They posed trolley-style dilemmas to millions of people, situations where an autonomous vehicle must choose who to kill, 1 person or 5. A child or an elderly man, a pregnant woman or a homeless man, a criminal or a dog. Over 40 million people responded, across every continent. The researchers collected this data, analyzed it, and built a kind of moral heat map of humanity. They called it a breakthrough, a glimpse into how humans around the world understand right and wrong. But there's a difference between collecting opinions and defining morality. Here's the fatal error. In trying to program ethical behavior into machines, we confuse majority preference with moral truth, because that's what the moral machine really became. Not a system for discovering what's right, but a system for aggregating what's popular. This is where the illusion sets in. It feels objective, it's data, it's quantifiable, but it's not grounded in moral philosophy, it's grounded in sociology. What people say they do when removed from the emotional weight of real-life consequences. And the results are telling. Across the globe, patterns emerged. In many countries, people prioritized saving younger lives over older ones. In others, higher social status meant greater moral worth. CEOs saved over homeless individuals. In some cases, people chose to spare pets over criminals. Even the gender of the victim swayed public judgment. What we built wasn't a moral compass, It was a mirror that revealed the hidden biases most people are unwilling to admit out loud. A machine trained not on ethical principles, but on gut instincts, stereotypes, and cultural blind spots. And the deeper danger? That we're now treating this mirror like a blueprint. When AI developers use this data to train decision-making systems, they aren't just copying how humans behave. They're amplifying our collective moral shortcuts. We're hard-coding ethical laziness into autonomous systems and calling it progress. This isn't just theoretical. Think of autonomous vehicles that must make real-time life and death decisions. Think of AI-driven healthcare systems prioritizing care. Think of military drones selecting targets. In all of these cases, algorithms built on flawed moral benchmarks are beginning to influence outcomes in the physical world, and with them comes a terrifying shift: the disappearance of responsibility. Once the decision is made by an algorithm, it becomes easier to say, "It wasn't me, it was the machine." But the machine didn't emerge from a vacuum. The data came from us. The code came from human assumptions, human simplifications, human fear. That's the real problem. We built a system that confuses preference with principle, that replaces deliberation with data, that asks what most people would do, then treats that answer as if it were right. But morality doesn't work that way. It never has. And if we keep pretending it does, if we keep asking machines to solve our ethical dilemmas by tallying votes, we're not creating justice. We're just crowdsourcing acceptable casualties. If this video is making you think twice about what we call progress, subscribe, because here, we question what others automate. The trolley problem wasn't meant to build a machine, it was meant to build a mirror. When philosopher Philip first introduced the trolley problem in 1967, it wasn't a blueprint for artificial intelligence. It was a philosophical scalpel designed to cut into our moral intuitions and expose their contradictions. The goal wasn't to decide what's right or wrong. It was to understand why we feel certain actions are justifiable in some situations, but not in others. The real value of moral thought experiments like this isn't in their answers, it's in the discomfort they create. They force us to wrestle with competing values: justice versus mercy, harm versus inaction, personal responsibility versus systemic outcomes. They're meant to provoke, not prescribe. But somewhere along the way, we got it backward. We started treating these philosophical dilemmas as moral calculators, tools to generate ethical decisions on demand. Worse, we began feeding their simplified structure into machines, as if the fact that they're easy to code made them accurate reflections of real-life ethics. This is the core error. A thought experiment is not a moral benchmark. It has no ground truth, no correct answer. Its very structure is a trap. No matter what choice you make, there's a cost. That's what makes it powerful. That's what makes it human. But machines aren't human. And when we remove the tension from the dilemma, when we boil it down to ones and zeros, we also strip it of the very thing that gives ethics its meaning: moral struggle. This misunderstanding has serious consequences. Take, for example, the way autonomous systems are trained to handle life and death scenarios. If we treat the outcomes of a thought experiment like a dataset, if we assume that because most people said swerve right, the machine should swerve right, we're no longer asking ethical questions, we're asking statistical ones. We've stopped thinking about right and wrong and started thinking about plausible deniability. That's not morality, that's automation. G.E. Moore once argued that moral truth is a kind of non-natural property, something we can't reduce to scientific facts or logical deductions. He called it moral intuitionism, the idea that some actions just feel wrong in a way that's hard to explain but impossible to ignore. You don't calculate that feeling, you sense it. Others, like Ronald Dworkin, took a different view. He believed morality was interpretive, not a gut feeling, but a process of reasoning, of weighing principles, confronting contradictions, and slowly working toward clarity. Not certainty, clarity. Either way, the common thread is this: Morality is a process, not a formula. It's something we wrestle with, something we evolve through. And that's exactly what thought experiments were designed to stimulate, not bypass. But what happens when we stop using these experiments to challenge ourselves and start using them to train machines? We lose the tension, we lose the doubt, we lose the moment where we pause and say, "This isn't obvious, this is hard, let me think." And when that moment disappears, so does morality itself. Because a world without doubt isn't a moral world, it's a mechanical one. That's what the morality machine threatens to become. Not a tool for ethical decision-making, but a device for ethical avoidance. A system that simulates moral behavior so well, we forget it was ever our job to wrestle with these questions in the first place. We didn't build a thinking machine. We built a mirror, one that reflects back our discomfort, our contradictions, and our refusal to face the hardest truth. There are no easy answers. So where does this lead us? If the data is biased, the dilemmas are artificial, and the thought experiments were never meant to be prescriptive, what exactly are we building when we try to teach machines morality? We're building a reflection, not of our ethics, but of our contradictions. This is the climax of the problem. The morality machine isn't solving our dilemmas, it's embodying them, accelerating them, and worst of all, legitimizing them under the authority of objectivity. Because once the code is written, once the machine executes its decision, it feels like the answer. Unbiased, mathematically clean. If the car chose to hit the jaywalker over the doctor, we assume it did so fairly, logically. It's just following its moral programming. But whose morality is that? In truth, it's a tangled hybrid of assumptions. Cultural preferences, public opinion, philosophical oversimplification, and the cold logic of code. A morality designed not through deliberation, but through aggregation. Here's the danger. Once it's automated, it becomes invisible. No one questions the ethics of a machine that's doing what we told it to. And yet, what we've actually done is surrender our ethical responsibility to a system that was never designed to carry it. This is how injustice spreads, not through malice, but through delegation. You don't need to dehumanize someone if the algorithm already did it. You don't need to make the hard call if the AI has already made it for you. And all of this happens under the banner of progress. Consider the real-world stakes. Autonomous vehicles deciding who to swerve into. Medical AIs deciding which patients to prioritize. Credit algorithms deciding who's trustworthy. Military drones choosing which targets to strike. Each of these systems is being trained to decide ethically, but not based on deeply reasoned moral frameworks. They're being trained on efficiency, cost-benefit analyses, and, at best, an averaged-out version of crowdsourced ethics. We're teaching machines to simulate moral choice without moral depth, to produce outcomes that feel ethical without ever understanding ethics. And, ironically, the more sophisticated the machine becomes, the more convinced we are that it's doing the right thing. Not because we've thought more deeply about morality, but because we've stopped thinking at all. Phil Badger described this temptation clearly when he imagined creating a moral constitution. 3 principles, cleanly ordered, capable of being applied to any dilemma. It was elegant, it was logical, but it collapsed the moment it was stress-tested against real scenarios. Students couldn't follow it consistently. They wanted to change the rules every time the stakes changed. Because that's what being human means. We adapt, we feel, we reconsider. Machines don't. And that's why this moment, right now, is so dangerous, because we're starting to treat the simulacrum of ethics as if it were the real thing. We're mistaking computation for conscience. When a machine reflects our contradictions, it's not fixing them, it's freezing them in place, institutionalizing them, locking them into systems that scale and replicate without question. So the morality machine doesn't save us from our ethical burdens. It just wears a clean interface while carrying them out. What we're building is not the future of moral clarity. It's a future where our worst assumptions are automated, multiplied, and rendered immune to reflection. And the scariest part? We asked it to do exactly that. It's easy to think the danger lies in machines disobeying us. The truth is far more disturbing. The real horror begins when they do exactly what we told them to. Imagine watching a self-driving car hit a child because the code told it to spare a CEO. Imagine a medical AI denying treatment to an uninsured patient because the algorithm deems their life lower priority. Imagine a drone striking a building because its inputs matched a pattern we once approved. There's no error here, no malfunction, just obedience. This is the emotional fallout of the morality machine, the haunting recognition that every line of code reflects a human decision, our decision. Every logical operation is a ghost of a value we uploaded, whether we meant to or not. And now, those ghosts are acting in the world, without hesitation, without empathy, without doubt. But here's the twist. Machines don't feel guilt. We do. We're the ones left holding the moral weight when a machine executes a protocol that leads to someone's death. We're the ones who have to ask, after the fact, was that the right call? But by then, the code has moved on. It's already calculating the next decision. The algorithm never looks back. We do. We replay the footage, we question the assumptions, we feel the horror of realizing we trained this system to do this. We optimized it for speed, for efficiency, for rational outcomes, and it delivered. But what it didn't deliver, what it can't deliver, is meaning, or mercy, or the terrible, beautiful weight of having to choose when there's no perfect answer. Bill Badger once warned, one of the attractions of the idea of a morality machine is that thinking along these lines might keep us honest and prevent moral discourse amounting to the post hoc rationalization of our decisions. But that only works if we stay in the loop, if we remain the ones doing the choosing, the doubting, the reflecting. Handing that off to a machine may feel clean, but it's an escape. And every escape comes with a cost. The morality machine doesn't take away our responsibility, it just hides it behind a screen. So where does this leave us? Not with a smarter machine, but with a sharper mirror. The morality machine, whether it's an algorithm in a car, a hospital, or a courtroom, isn't here to save us. It's here to expose us, to show us what happens when we try to outsource moral judgment to a system that cannot feel the consequences of its actions. But this isn't a tragedy, it's a test, because buried in all this complexity is a chance, a moment to reawaken the part of us that machines can't replicate. Not logic, not speed, but conscience. Moral awareness, the ability to sit in ambiguity, feel the tension and still choose, not because it's optimal, but because it's right. This is what it means to stay human in a moral simulation. It means refusing the illusion of clean answers. It means questioning the code, even when it works. It means designing systems that serve our ethics, not replace them. And maybe it means accepting what Phil Badger ultimately decided, that a moral constitution, however elegant, will always be under stress. It will never answer everything, but that doesn't mean we throw it away. It means we carry it with humility, knowing that principles aren't programs, they're promises, not to be perfect, but to stay engaged, because in the end, the morality machine isn't our enemy. Our enemy is the part of us that wants to stop thinking. So what do we do with all this? How do we navigate a world where our machines are being trained to make moral decisions, often with more power and less oversight than the humans who built them? Start here. Don't confuse consensus with truth. Just because thousands of people prefer one outcome doesn't make it morally right. Ethics is not a popularity contest. If a moral machine reflects public opinion, it's only echoing biases, not correcting them. Treat AI outputs as questions, not answers. When a machine gives you a moral outcome, don't ask, what did it decide? Ask, what assumptions led it here? Who programmed them in? What voices were left out? Use the output as a starting point for dialogue, not a verdict. keep humans in the loop, especially in hard decisions. Moral weight cannot be delegated to systems that don't bear it. Whether it's in healthcare, warfare, or the justice system, final moral accountability must always rest with people who can reflect, reconsider, and revise. Learn to live with ambiguity. There is no perfect algorithm for ethics, no formula for compassion, and no shortcut to wisdom. Real morality involves uncertainty, conflict, and the terrifying freedom to choose when no answer feels clean. This is not a video about how to build better machines. It's a video about building better humans. Humans who can resist the allure of moral automation and instead do the harder work, sitting with discomfort, listening across disagreement, and staying awake to the consequences of our choices. Because in the age of algorithms, thinking ethically is not optional. It's a rebellion. And if you're someone who still believes that questions matter more than quick answers, that conscience beats code, and that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't automate our souls, subscribe. We're just getting started.